Hi, my name is Benedict. You may have noticed I've done a lot less of this recently. Well, you may also have noticed I've just basically pulled out of almost every group. I got tired of the fact that the business doesn't seem to be about what it's supposed to be about. And the thing is, this is not the business. Groups and forums and stuff, they could be, but they choose not to be. As I said to somebody, unfortunately these days the culture is of everyone being a pantheon of one. Pantheon being like that bunch of Greek gods that hang together and do cool or uncool things. The problem is now that everybody thinks that they are a sole single thing, and they will take from people and then have them cease to exist. Kind of like a peon or a character in The Sims who appears to do something for you and then it just evaporates. This is not how business is built. Business is always built on lots of people working together. Being in groups and forums, unfortunately, is no longer about people working together. It's about them dumping their new song and expecting to get likes and what have you, and that's not building anything. But anyway, I'm not doing much of this unless it amuses me. I had another question about how do we make Reason sound less like Reason sound, which I'm not going to attack Reason sound, but I'm going to attack the broader question, which is how do I get my sounds to feel like they're organic, like they live in the mix? And that is a really important one. We will touch on why Reason seems to be a little bit more thin or papery than some others, but it's not a flaw, it's merely a feature of Reason, which I actually think is a pretty good one, but one you need to take the time and effort to. Now, the other thing is that people say, oh, but your videos need to be way shorter. That in itself is a mindset issue, which is the very cause of the problem that we're going to look at. People will go, oh, but you need to do so many steps to get to where it sounds good. Okay, yep, fair enough, of course. If you walk onto stage and expect to be able to deliver amazing, insert your own idea of what is amazing there, then you're on the wrong path. You are back on that pantheon of one, I am a god, and that everything revolves around me. It's not going to work out, Sonny Jim. You can be as pissed with me as you like about that. Let's take a sound. It's warm, it's chewy. The problem that most people have is that when they try to make this sound, they end up with something that's more like this. And rather than doing the work to get there, they go, but I need new presets. And that's not going to get you anywhere. What it will do is possibly this. We'll add a few layers of this and that here. But note, this really isn't the equal of what I had before. So let's get rid of these things and start to bring our layers back in. Yes, a chorus, pretty bog standard chorus. And I wouldn't necessarily use this in reality, but it is a good chorus when you work out how to get it to do the things you need to do. There's an audio delay here. There's some modulation magic. And listen to the difference. That's nothing but some modulation, LFOs. Flat, mobile. Hard, flat, brittle. Warm, rich, mobile. This is the real sneaky key. This is a combination of devices, which we will look at later. Put these all together. That's the sound we put in the mix, and we go, yes, that's really organic and vibrant. So again, from here, which is hard to love, to really rich and warm. The other half, because this is layers, and if you don't do more than one layer, then you can't get that amount of movement. The thing with analog is that it's not any better, it's actually worse than digital. But digital requires you to put in the extra features, the failures of analog. You need to put them in. If you don't put them in, then you're looking for a digital sound, and that can be wonderful, but it's going to sound hard and flat. Yes, you can go simply say, oh, well, I'll go buy Diva, it does those things for me already. Okay, fair enough. But it's not really putting you in control. You're still going to find once you get that sound into the mix, it's probably going to feel dead. So we build up layers, and one of the really important layers is reverb. Let's again turn this sound into not very attractive. Add a reverb. Hear how it adds very little indeed. But if we then modulate our reverb, sorry, there's a truck happening outside. Hear how that space around the sound, and therefore the sound itself, becomes a lot richer and deeper. And that's without our sound actually being particularly pleasant. So let's turn this back into a pleasant sound. Each one of these layers is a layer of modulation. So chorusing, a modulating delay, LFOing, and combination of LFOing and it's modulation and some saturation. So we got a nice sound. Now we feed it to reverb. It's a little bit better with the flat reverb, but as soon as we put this, so what we have is not just a single sound, unmoving, backed by unmoving clones of itself, which are echoes and reverbs and what have you. We've got a sound that's incredibly moving, mobile. It's doing this all the time. And the echoes and reverbs that are coming back are also got their own movements. So it's constantly like this, which is why it sounds so rich. And if we blindly said to somebody, oh yeah, that was a Jupiter 8, not a Europa out of reason, then they'd probably go, oh yeah, I get that, you know, it's nice. It's because we've just done the work. And if we don't do the work, we're not going to get the results. So let's look a little bit more at what is done. Again, we don't want to get into the flaw of using onboard effects. Some onboard effects can be great, and these are okay, but they lack power, because while the sounds are okay, it's still really quite rigid and flat. I will occasionally use these in a mix, but that's just to fill out before I hit the things that are doing cool stuff. So 2020 modulating delay. The reason I'm showing this rather than the echo is, well, I made it and it's free and it's designed to do the very thing that I'm talking about. So if we pull out the dry, we've got a little bit of drive on the beginning, just a little tiny bit, so that's a sort of saturation, so it's changing the qualities of the sound. So what's coming back from the echo is not the same as the original. It's really important. That's the big problem I have with the delay here, is there's no way to have the sound particularly different from what comes in. Yes, you can use the mod matrix to modulate and what have you, but it's not the easiest way of doing it. So I bypass that and use this. I've got a high pass and a low pass, so that's giving me some tone control, some difference between the original and what's coming back. Obviously, we don't want them to be too different, otherwise they do what's called delaminating. They don't come together. They have to be close enough to come together, but different enough to be like, oh, that's a layer of something. We've got the time. I never, as a general rule, BPM anything. It's about how these two sounds interact. Oops. Let's pull this down to. And assuming that the best way to do that is by putting it into BPM sync is completely the opposite of organic. The real world has rhythms, but they're constantly moving. And so if we're wanting an analog feel, then the very last thing that we want to do is to lock that into tempo sync. If you are remotely good at what you do, you should be able to feel when something hits a nice groove. So you simply move this until you go, that's grooving nicely for my piece. Not grooving perfectly for the formula of this genre. That's a workout, that's not music, and no matter how excellent you get your things, your music will feel pointless, and therefore it will feel inorganic and flat and So find your times, and that should only really be done when you've got a feel for how this is moving. There's a little bit of left-right offset here. The amount of feedback, that's going to depend on your piece, obviously. And then have it blend to achieve whatever the required outcome here is. Now with this, it's a string sound, so I don't want massive repetitions. I just want this to feel a lot fatter. And we're doing that. We've then got modulation. We can have the echo go wobbly. And again, how it does that is going to depend entirely on the material. We can have that in mono, which is great if you are finding that your sounds are getting too wide, because a lot of people automatically go wide, going, oh, that'll make it seem more engaging. And while, yes, we perceive stereo to be like it's more up in my face and big and huge, it can become seriously problematic in mixing. But stereo now gives us this really... We just need to watch how that fits in the mix, but that's embiggened. The first thing I actually did was this. Now, in no way am I making this an advert for this device. I just like this device a lot because it's very versatile. Just look at the fact that we've got a pair of LFOs here, which are being flown in. We've got, let's turn them up. The first one, which is moving slightly slowly. And the second one, which is moving slightly fast. We're summing the two together, so as you see here, they become erratic. And then flying enough in just to get a slight feel of movement that shouldn't be too obvious. I know that lo-fi has this whole drunk thing. That's your business. The problem is it's super off-putting if you do too much of it. So that gives us this tremendous warmth or depth straight away. What I've got is the same CV input is being used twice. So this is receiving both of those LFOs as once. You can do this very same thing with, really any LFO device, and you can, by rights, do it with the onboard LFOs and envelopes as well. I just kind of think it's nice when you fly it in from the outside, but whatever gets you there. But I do like the sound and feel that it gets when it comes from the outside, and you can use the onboard LFOs for onboard stuff, like say maybe vibrato, which I deliberately didn't do here. So we've got the CV input 1, so that's the togetherness, what you see here, of that coming to engine 1 and 2's pitch. So oscillators 1 and 2, their pitch. I've then got this CV1 latched. So CV input or CV input latched, which means that at the moment of key strike, it takes whatever value it is seeing at its input port and saying that's the value that's going to be sampled and held for that note. And I'm sending that to just the second oscillator. So you can hear that there's a little bit of pitch variation. Combine the two, and we get a lot of movement. Obviously, once we combine the chorus, which is widening our sound, with an echo, which is widening our sound. By deepening our sound, I don't mean stereo wide. I mean widening the frequency-isms of it and the movement of it, because it's constantly moving around now. It feels rich and textured and deep and warm. And then the last step in this process here is this, which is 2 devices. So my looser, which is a freebie, this is essentially doing the same thing as what these 2 LFOs are doing here, one a little slow, one a little slower, or fast, slow, whatever, and that's just an echo that has no mix. So it's quite literally taking this in and moving the modulation, which you heard in the modulated delay. It makes it go, ooh. Only this is, rather than doing it as a regular thing, as more of an irregular thing. And it's just the same as what we've done here, only the times are going to be different. So this has 2 functions. One is just to create this movement, so it's moving around. This is what tape does. Bear in mind, great quality tape that's really well maintained has very, very little movement, but nonetheless, those layers of movement compound each other, and this is a really important thing that people miss. They go, oh, well, I'll do something really fast and move on. Okay, that's absolutely fine, but if you then say my stuff doesn't sound as rich and engaging as I want it to be, it's like, well, because, dude, you didn't do the work. A couple of layers of this really comes together. Personally, when I'm mixing, I put this in right at the end. And then the second function is this. I really like this saturator, but really only in the tube setting. It adds a nice, bright, cheery sort of sound. It's running a little hot in this situation, but that's fine. Again, all you'll be hoping to hear there is that this becomes feeling deeper and richer, because we've now got 1 layer of modulation, 2 layer of modulation, 3 layer of modulation, 4 layer of modulation. So they're all working together, and of course the same thing's happening over here. It goes off to this reverb, and this reverb is similarly modulated. I do not use different settings on each of these when I put one in on every instrument and then on the reverb, simply because if you've got one tape deck, one mixing console, generally speaking, the sound is the same across them. If you put different settings on every single one of these, you then start to do what's called delaminating them. The layers don't really come together. These should be very small on their own, but when you put them together, they really brighten up. So here's one of the reasons why I really like this little fella. I can pop them in and out. See how it riches up a lot. This is perhaps a little more dramatic than I would always do, and if it were in somebody else's mix, a client's mix, if it's rock or whatever, it may not be quite as obvious and dramatic as this, but your ABs will still be essentially the same. It just may not be quite as this is, because I want it to be relatively clear. So that combination of layers has taken us from a sound that's really pretty dead that alone, just this LFO, has given us a lot more organic movement, chorus, echo, and then again I wouldn't be doing this till I'd actually finished the mix. Reverb. So the reason that this is a send reverb and not a reverb per thing is simply because it's layers. We want each layer to feed the next. So this chorus is feeding into the delay. If we turn this chorus off here, it's infinitely more powerful when there are layers working upon layers. So really by rights, this is working first. then the chorus, then your modulator delay, then our tape and tube into the reverb, and it's tape and tube. So all those layers work together, and of course when we mix, we have to have the layers of the instruments working together, and they feed and compound each other. And when I get to a master, I'll bring in this guy, which is a different form of, because our multi-track tape has got one sort of distortion and movement, and our master tape is going to have a different sort of distortion and movement. And then this, because I just like the way that it feels, it biggens and brightens. And yes, I always have soft tube knob on right from the beginning, so I'm not working in a totally flat system. But that's it, all those layers feed each other, and that is how you get a much richer sound. In terms of reason sound, if we look at the F2 window, and we take off, see how this goes right the way to the top? See how it no longer goes right the way to the top? You can see the movement. Hear how that sounds hard, brittle, papery? Hear how this sounds warmer, more organic. We'll ignore the movement section for the moment, where in fact we can even turn that out. Actually no, we can't, because that's what's doing that roll-off. This by its very nature rolls off some of the very, very high highs. So anything that's up here, notice this difference here. And when you look at a lot of other doors, or you export some sounds from those doors, they are automatically rolling this off. Reason doesn't. I actually think that's a really good thing. You've just got to be aware. So one of the reasons that I really like this combo is that it rolls off that brittle high. One of the things I don't love about a lot of other doors is that they automatically roll that off, and they don't give you a button even to say, here, I actually want to keep that in this instance. So it means that it's very easy to make muddy sounding mixes, just as it's very easy in Reason to make brittle sounding mixes. But if you are doing the right thing and adding your layers, then it's going to sound very warm and organic without that over-toppiness that is just endemic to a system that says, here, I'm going to leave it up to you how you do that. All right, if you have any questions about this, ask on down below. If you want to hire me, because bear in mind, not everybody has this feeling and not everybody wants to put in the time and energy to do all of this work to get their mixes to feel amazing, and then also ask me, pop off onto my site. There's a form there to fill in and we can get to work. Most importantly, get out there, have a good day.